All up, this and other projects demonstrate the government's strong, ongoing commitment to investing in Taranaki in its transport development and economic growth.
Question number 12.
Oh, you know it is.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. Does she stand by her statement in June 2014 with regard to the Investing in Educational Success initiative, quote, "Parents will be very pleased we're making such good progress on something that will make a real difference in our schools and classrooms"?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, yes, and I would like to congratulate the member that this is the first full and accurate quote that he has attributed to me.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
How is having 93% of the $359 million in funding that was appropriated back in 2014 remaining unspent in the Crown account making a real difference to schools and classrooms?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, yes, I'm very impatient about that figure because it reflects the one-year delay caused by the NZEI's negotiations, and so a program that was supposed to begin in 2014-15 did not get underway till 2015-16, and despite that year's delay, which has the practical effect of hundreds of teachers being denied access to these new roles, we are nevertheless at a case of being 180 communities of learning formed, accounting for 1,503 schools and kura, and nearly 500,000 students in New Zealand.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Does she think perhaps the delay could have been avoided if she'd designed the policy better in the first place, given after it was announced a survey of school principals found that 54% were opposed outright to the plan, 27% had serious concerns about the policy, while only 4% thought it was a good idea?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
No, Mr Speaker, I don't agree with the member, given that the working group involved representatives from the peak bodies, from the unions. Prior to it being announced, Mr Speaker, we worked nevertheless at the pace that the unions wanted to work at, and we are now in the situation where, as I've said, over half of all schools are involved in this really exciting initiative. But the travesty here is the delay has caused hundreds of teachers not to have access to these new roles.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Why will parents be pleased that over $330 million remains sitting unspent in the Crown accounts, given that since she became Minister in 2011, parental contributions to their kids' education has increased by over 23%, almost 5 times the rate of inflation?
The Honourable Hekia
Mr
Parata.
Speaker, parents should be very concerned about that member's ability to actually read government accounts, where it tells, or even survey information, because the figure that he persists with includes fees for private schools, whereas the facts based on the financial returns of schools is that parental donations have remained consistent at about 1.8%, and they are donations. Therefore, they are voluntary. Therefore, parents are making them.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Why have 32% of the allowances paid to teachers under the Investing in Educational Success initiative been paid to teachers working in the highest decile schools, while only 2% has been paid to teachers working in decile 1 schools?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, we're just heading past the 2-year mark of this program. When it first began, higher decile schools were the earlier adopters. But as of the end of last year, I'm happy to relieve the member's anxiety by telling him that we have 150 decile 1 schools, whereas we have 141 decile 10 schools. We have 156 decile 3 schools and 156 decile 8 schools. In fact, the distribution across all types of schools is pretty even. So the member will therefore have his anxiety relieved.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Why does she continue to claim that school funding is at record levels when the analysis released today through Infometrics shows that on a per-child basis, School funding's increased by just 2.3% in real terms under her government, compared to an increase of 22% in real terms between 2002 and 2008 under the last Labor government.
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, I haven't seen the Infometrics report yet, but there's only one set of facts and they're in the government's accounts, the budget accounts, and the member is invited to go to my website where they're there in very simple terms to understand that we have gone from just over $8 billion to $11.04 billion. In the period 2010 to 2016, inflation, I think, cumulatively went up by 10.9%, while ops grants went up by 16.8%, and the number of kids, thank you, Mr Hipkins, went up by 3.6%.
Question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
How has decreasing funding for school capital by 13.9% in real terms over the past 8 years resulting in kids languishing in cold, damp, leaky and overcrowded classrooms made a real difference in our schools and classrooms?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, it's just hard to take this seriously. My Associate Minister, the Honourable Nikki Kaye, has done something that no other minister has done, which is to commission and to have a condition assessment of every school building across New Zealand. That now gives us a basis against which to invest taxpayers' funds and prioritising where we do redevelopment, refurbishment, address leaky building issues, earthquake strengthening and so forth. And what I can tell the member again is that factually we have spent a third more in the 8 years that we have been in government than occurred in the 8 years under that previous administration, all of which is in the government accounts, publicly available for those who can read them.
Order. And that concludes questions for oral answer. The House comes to the debate on the Budget Policy Statement 2017.